I did have an interesting thing. Did I tell you what was going on with my internet at my house, Andre? Was
No.
whenever the landline rings,
Oh, yeah.
it often, well, not every time, but very often it knocks out the internet. So hopefully my phone won't ring. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome, welcome.
And just as a reminder, everyone, we are recording the session so we can send that out, and hopefully I can send it out a lot faster for this module than we did in the last one. But we're continuing to do that and post it to YouTube.
So I have a bunch of slides to cover tonight, but some of them are only last 10 seconds. So just wanted to let you know that. So we're still planning to get out right on time. And I hope that during this week, you have been working on filling out the first part of your wildland fire assessment program checklist. And you're coming up with questions and taking pictures of those questions so that we can talk about them together. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. If I can click the right buttons here. Okay, can you see my slide that says homework for module 2?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I just said. So keep noticing and asking questions. And when you get to real specific questions, that's what we want to talk about together, as well as when we meet in person about it. And then last week, someone had a question about whether if there was a tall tree right near your house, how would that behave in a fire, and should you cut it down? And what I want you to just think about for now, since I can't see that tree, is look at the branches and make sure they're not coming within 10 feet of the roof or the chimney. Check and see if the tree is not leaning toward the house. If it's starting to lean toward the house, that's a bad situation. And just check to see if the tree is in overall good health and can withstand just wind or snow load on it and other things besides fire. And then look at that tree and see, how would that tree catch on fire? If it's all by itself and it looks pretty good, otherwise, you don't have to worry about it as much as if it's surrounded by other trees or leaning toward your house. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe you'll have that answer available for others. Like I said, 80-foot tree, 60 feet from the house, otherwise safe, standing up tall and not surrounded by burnable stuff. Sounds like an okay deal.
It's less of a fire safety question than just a regular tree health question at that point.
Good.
I have to click that button. There we go. So we're on module 3 of 8. This slide isn't quite caught up, but we're on home hardening against flying embers. Tonight, what we will cover in detail with pictures is roofs, walls, vents, skylights, chimneys, sidings, and foundation, windows, decks, fences, detached structures, and then we'll touch on ingress and egress and overlapping home ignition zones and insurance and inventory. How about that? And remember, the reason we're doing this class for free is because the price has already been paid and we want to bless you so you can go out and bless other people. Look at those people. Oh my gosh, what a bunch. So private property homeowners have the primary responsibility for home wildfire protection on their own private property. You do this by maintaining the vegetation and maintaining the home itself. You start with the house and you go outward from there. We're talking about the physics of wildfire and how to make a community more ignition resistant by modifying the structures and their immediate surroundings. Because we know that fires don't move as a big wave on a single path, but they are mostly spread by the flying embers, which is a solvable problem. I'm going to interrupt my own presentation here to give you a commercial break. I just found out today that the Colorado Springs Fire Department is teaching exactly what we're teaching in a series of 6 town hall meetings coming up this summer. And you can go to them in person, even though you don't live in Colorado Springs. Some of you do. But even if you don't, you can go in person, check out their website for the locations. And also you can watch them as recordings from their Facebook live stream. So they're going to be talking about, gosh, get this, how to prepare your home for wildfire, how to create a wildfire action plan, which we're going to talk about in a couple of weeks, and knowing when and how to evacuate. So look at that website and check those out if you are interested, but you're learning it all here too. So this is a photo of a house destroyed in the Black Forest fire in 2013. You can see that all the trees are not burned and there was no crown fire, but the house is gone. Why? Because the burning embers came in and landed on the house. As 80% of homes that are destroyed in wildfires are because of the burning embers that land on the house. This house was not hardened.
Now, as we're watching that live from the helicopters,
Yeah.
the Black Forest is like, oh, they would zoom in and this house in the middle of green trees, no visible sign of fire within a quarter mile, half a mile. And then there'd be this little fire, like somebody lit a little campfire on the deck.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
It's like, it looked like the strangest thing, looked like arson.
But the people did the arson to themselves, basically. Yeah. So
Landed
that's
on the wooden deck and or wooden something, and off it went.
Combustible something, and the house caught on fire and it burned down. Yeah. If the house does not catch on fire, it will not burn down. So in a few minutes, we're going to watch a short video demonstrating what this looks like when ember showers actually hit the house. Most homes destroyed during a wildfire catch fire because of the ember showers. And yeah, if your home doesn't ignite, it won't burn down. So the National Fire Protection Association is recommending that new building codes would require all homes to be ignition resistant, which would mean regulating types of building construction materials. That is kind of controversial, but it's one possible thought. And we're going to continue using this form, the home assessment checklist from the Wildland Fire Assessment Program. Remember, the correct or safer answer is always a yes. And if you have to answer no to a question, then that means that's something you need to add to your to-do list. And you will prioritize that based on your time available and the money available. Not everything on this list costs that much to do. It's just getting them all done. And if you run into questions on your own home, we recommend you ask your local fire department, if you have one, or your local state forest service, and just take pictures of everything so we can get the questions to the people who can answer them. And have all of you succeeded in printing out your checklist so far? And you've had that to work on?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So last week we looked at how the embers impact the zone around your home. And this week we're going to see how the embers landing on your home will behave differently depending on what they land on. This is in the 2010 4 Mile Canyon fire in Boulder, which burned 6,100 acres. They had a relatively high amount of resources fighting that fire. They had 39 fire engines, 12 tenders, and 150 personnel. But out of 474 homes that were exposed to the fire, only 75 homes were protected by personnel at all, and only 10 were protected at any given time. So 84% of the homes were never protected at all by personnel. Could those homes defend themselves against the flying embers? Of the 162 homes that were destroyed, embers destroyed 83% of them, leaving green trees around them. And 17% of the 162 homes that were lost were destroyed by crown fires. But those homes had to do it for themselves. Besides evaluating the home ignition zone around your house, like we learned last week, we're going to analyze every nook and cranny and vulnerability of your home itself. Looking at it from the point of view of an ember storm that is blowing around your house, we're going to look for the chinks in your armor, and the embers will smolder and burn anywhere they have fuel, oxygen, and heat. So we're going to learn how to starve those embers. So now we're going to watch two quick videos. The first one is a demonstration from the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. It's called "Why Only Half This Home Caught Fire." It shows how home hardening makes a difference, and it's done in a lab setting. It's a great big building with embers blowing all the time. So what you're going to see in the video is the left side is traditional building materials, and the right side is building materials designed to reduce the risk of igniting. So while you're watching, notice how quickly the ignition happens. And I'll play the video, and then I might replay the first minute again so you can see better. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to switch my screen. I'm going to, let's see, now I've got to share my screen again. Share sound. Okay, ready?
From start to finish, we're going to start with our ember generators, which we use to recreate a realistic ember exposure. Embers are those small burning and smoldering particles that may travel ahead of the fire front. And what we do with our generators is we create the realistic exposure, and in our wind tunnel, we're able to throw them at a building. And then we have a building that has two sides to it, a good side, which uses wildfire resistant construction, and what we're considering a typical building that we would see in a wildfire prone area. Exactly as we expected, that mulch on the ground there caught fire from the embers. The fire from the mulch burned up under this deck, and this whole deck was on fire. And so this fire on this deck caused flames right against the home. And then if we look there at the base of the door, there was actually the flames from this deck that burned through the bottom of the door, and on the inside of the house we started to see smoke and flames. And so because this deck was a combustible material attached to the building, when the embers led to the ignition of this deck, we got flames inside of the building. Here we are on the wildfire resistant side of the house, where we had non-combustible siding, a 5-foot non-combustible zone and 6-inch gap. We had a metal gutter and multi-pane windows, and we see in comparison to the non-wildfire resistant side, this side had the same ember exposure. If you look here in the mulch, you can actually see some of the embers that had accumulated, but because they had no susceptible fuel to ignite, they just landed there and fizzled out. Now here we have ornamental vegetation that again is susceptible to the embers, but because it's more than 5 feet away from the home, it didn't have enough energy to ignite, and it never led to a flame impact on the building.
Oops. Okay. My phone beeped right when I was, okay. Well. Okay. Now I'm going to share the other video with you. Can you see that one, building a fire resistant home?
Yes.
Okay, I hope you can hear this. Let's try it. Did you hear that go boom?
Yes.
People often assume that the cost of building a fire-resistant home is more expensive than traditional construction. That's not the case. A Headwaters Economics home hardening study from 2018 found that a new home built to wildfire-resistant code can be constructed for roughly the same cost as a typical home. It's not just about new construction, though. When making repairs and upgrades to your home, it's no more expensive to choose fire-resistant materials. So when it's time to replace your cedar shingle siding, choose a fiber cement shingle that looks exactly like wood. They won't burn, they last longer, they hold paint better, they don't rot or mold, and cost no more than cedar. Similar materials are available for roofing, decks, and fences. Don't be fooled into thinking you can't afford to make your home more fire resistant. The initial investment is the same, the long-term cost is actually lower, and your home, family, and neighborhood will be safer.
Okay, now we're back. So now we're back to my PowerPoint. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, I goofed up on replaying the second part of that video, but I lost it. Now, every video that I've showed you, I think is included in that list called curated list of videos and websites for you. So if you want to show that to somebody, it's right there for you. Or if you want to replay it for yourself. But what the biggest point of that first video was to show you how half that home actually defended itself against those blowing embers that blew right up against it. I hope that was pretty clear. All right. And building a fire resistant home, people worry that it's too much, but he whizzed through all the numbers here, but if you really plan ahead, you can make it a very affordable decision. And a lot of what we're going to talk about is free or costs $3 to go buy some caulk or moving your patio cushions inside until you're going to sit on them. Those are all ways of doing home hardening also. So we're going to hit the spreadsheet now. Please jump to page 4 of the checklist. And the section is called roof covering, about a third of the way down. So this first item says, the roof is the most vulnerable part of your whole house. And it is a huge landing pad for thousands of burning brands from the ember storm, which can be flaming branches, tennis ball sized coal, and tiny sparks. So first question is, do you have a Class A roof? That would be concrete or clay tiles, fiberglass, asphalt composition shingles, or metal. And we'll look at more examples next. Now this is a Class C roof, and this one happens to be in pretty bad shape. It is a cedar shake roof. And even when they're in good shape, they're still full of crevices and dry fuel that provide about the same level of safety as some plywood or particle board up on your roof. It's a perfect place for wind-driven, burning embers to land and smolder and eventually burn down your house. Wood shingles are combustible. They can be treated at the mill with fire retardant chemicals and make them into a Class B roof. However, the fire retardant properties of the chemicals become less effective with weathering, and they can be overcome if the shingles are painted or stained. So don't count on that. If you have a bad roof, please make it a very high priority to get it replaced. And yes, this one item is expensive, but it's not as expensive as rebuilding your whole house. Also check the roof edges. Even if you have a Class A roof, but there are gaps in it like this, the sparks can still blow underneath it and get inside the house and catch it on fire from the inside out. Keep your gutters and roof edges clear of debris. If they fill up with leaves or pine needles all the time, take a look at how many trees are overhanging the roof and really evaluate whether you want those trees there at all. It would save you a lot of work to not have them always filling that up. And remember how the little embers would view this scene. To them, it looks like a Hawaiian vacation and they would never want to leave. So, so that's what, there we are there. Some of these questions get awfully technical. A drip edge. Is there a drip edge installed at the roof edge to protect any exposed roof sheathing or fascia? Just remember overall, the goal is to reduce the access to roof crevices and the wood supports under the shingles. You're looking for vulnerabilities. So if you're not sure of something you're looking at on your house, take a picture and ask your fire department. Remove any debris that has accumulated at the roof to wall intersections. For in this case, it's on a dormer next to the dormer on the roof. You're like I showed you, the roof is the biggest exposure to danger that you're going to have from the burning brands. And remember that the wind eddies will deposit the firebrands in exactly the same places as it deposits all the debris, such as the pine needles or the dead leaves or the snow. It's all going to blow the same way. So in this case, the next question says, are roof to wall intersections sided with non-combustible or ignition resistant siding? And here the answer is yes. I don't know if you can see it right here. Is my pointer showing up for you?
Yes,
right here,
yeah.
oh, that's great. That's a new trick I learned. So that's stucco right there. So you could answer yes to this question. The roof to wall intersections are sided with a non-combustible siding. Great, it's stucco. However, there is a second problem on this picture that shows the accumulation of debris at the intersection. Then you would have noted this in the previous item. So if you just evaluate one thing at a time and answer everything honestly, you'll get through it. Okay. So on cedar siding and log homes, they are combustible, but there is hope. If you can use flashing at the edges to buy yourself some space. This one shows metal flashing along the bottom of the house. So it's not ugly, shiny aluminum. It's got a patina on it that blends in with the flashing or blends in with the stained siding. But if a pile of burning embers got up against the house, they would be touching this metal instead of the wood, and there would be a less chance for them to ignite something. And since you already know that you're keeping your 0 to 5 foot zone clear of anything combustible, like we talked about last week, that'll help you out in this situation too. So the key to all these fuel-free zones is to stop direct flame contact from happening with the house. Here's another example of what metal flashing can look like. If the embers pile up in that edge blown by the wind, this provides less combustible surface where they can, they'll smolder, but they won't have anything to ignite. They'll be touching the metal instead of the wood. So look in all the corners and cracks where the winds would want to push those embers, and then think about the intersections and if you need to install flashing there. So we're in now the section called eaves on page 4. This one says venting exists in the soffit material and between the soffit and the attic space, yes or no? So this is making sure you have venting, which is very important. And this guy does, so he can answer yes. This whole section we're going to cover now in venting has a lot of very specific questions. And you can't see them all just from standing on your deck. You might have to climb up into the attic or use a flashlight or binoculars to see the answers to some of these questions. The main point to all of these is how vulnerable is the inside of your house because of the vents. So in this case, see what a big gap is created by the vents. So you must have venting, but you can add this mesh, 1/8 inch metal mesh behind the vent to fix the second problem. Yes or no, any vents in the eaves are covered with 1/8 inch corrosion resistant metal mesh screening. In this case, the answer is no. So you can see where it needs to be installed so that they could then answer yes and be safer. Just picture that blizzard storm of embers blowing up inside these eaves for 10 minutes and what would happen next. That's why they want that mesh there. These are open eaves, so you may not have this, but the question is really long. If the home has open eave framing, the vents have closure devices made of 1/4 inch thin sheet metal. Closures can be removed or opened after the wildfire threat has passed. Your answer might just be not applicable. I have not seen this in Colorado. But if this does look like something in your house, I even wonder about the feasibility of stopping to close these closures when you're trying to evacuate from a wildfire. And what do you do if you're not home when the fire happens? If I were looking at this home, I would advise the homeowner to get up there and install 1/8 inch metal mesh over those holes or along the whole underside of the eaves, whatever makes sense for their situation, now that they understand what the risk is that needs to be solved in the first place. The bottom line is just don't leave necessary openings unprotected from the embers. So now we're on page 5. Make sure your attic vents are located on the roof, are covered with 1/8 inch corrosion resistant metal mesh screening. This one looks different because you can buy vents that already have the mesh attached on the inside, or you can add mesh to like retrofit the vents you already have. This one, I can't tell by looking, but this one might even be intumescent mesh, which is something that expands when it's heated. So if burning embers flew up in there, it would actually cause that mesh to expand and close itself off. Yes or no? Attic vents located on the roof are free of debris. Well, the answer in this case is no. There's birds that made a nest in there. So if they took out that debris and add some metal mesh to prevent the birds from getting back in there again, and it would also prevent the flying embers, they would be in much better shape. Yes or no? 1/8 inch mesh. This is a tongue twister. Metal mesh screening is attached to the roofing under turbine vents. Inspect the area through the attic where the vent attaches to the roof, they say. So this is another example where you might not be able to see it from standing on the ground, but you might have to go up in the attic. This also shows the intumescent screening. Well, more about vents. You don't think about them that much, do you? Kim and I have a great story. We were looking at somebody's house in Rivers Divide last year, and their house was built into the hill. So we were getting a really up close and personal look at some of the vents that we usually couldn't see because they were right in front of us. That was fun. So does the home have low profile vents instead of dormer through roof vents? Why is this important? Well, it makes it's less of an opportunity for those embers to get in. And then it says, yes or no, ridge vents are rated for high wind and rain exposure. Well, why would that be important? Again, it's less opportunity for them to be ripped off by the wind and leave gaps in the roof, which would leave it open to the embers or the elements. Be sure that accumulated debris is removed. This is a roof, believe it or not. Make sure vegetation is pruned and overhanging limbs are trimmed away from any skylights. The key is maintenance. Just clean up your roof and around your house. We're going to talk more about this in the windows section coming up soon. So skylights. Does the home have tempered glass skylights instead of dome type plastic skylights? In this case, the answer is yes. You can kind of tell just when they're flat like this, it means they're not the plastic kind. The other ones, we're going to talk about tempered glass. It can withstand more heat than regular glass or plastic. And if the embers melted through plastic or cracked the regular glass, in this situation, your whole house would be at risk of being set on fire from the opening in the roof. And that's why they ask you about operable skylights being kept closed when a wildfire threatens. It would be another chink in your armor. So I have not seen skylights that open here in Colorado either, but if you do have ones that open, it might be a good idea to close them on times when you're not home, because you won't be able to rush home and close them when the fire comes. Yes or no? Chimney and stovepipe outlets are covered with non-flammable, corrosion-resistant screen of 1/4 inch mesh or smaller. 8-inch mesh would be better. Well, that's hard to say. 1/8 inch. And if you can't get up there, make a list of all of your roof and vent and window questions and get assistance from somebody who might be like a contractor who could go up there and help you take a look at what's up there and retrofit things as needed. Ask for help. Yes or no, the chimney is at least 10 feet away from tree branches, but not in this case. The tree needs maintenance. And so once they fix that, then the homeowner could say, yes, our trees are at least 10 feet away. Yes or no, siding and corner trim of the house is made of non-combustible or ignition-resistant material. On the left, you see the vinyl siding. Let's see on the left. It can soften and fall off, which will expose any gaps that it's covering up behind it. I have seen pictures of vinyl siding that deforms just because the sun is reflecting onto it from a window on another angle of the house. So if you have vinyl siding or you're thinking about using vinyl siding, you might want to reconsider that. On the right side, this is an example of non-combustible siding. This type here is called hardy board, which is also called cement board, but other non-combustible sidings are stucco, brick, and adobe. My old house used to be stucco, but behind that it was cedar siding and we had added the stucco on top. We discovered that created some hazardous vulnerabilities along the foundation where the wood was still, you could reach underneath the underside of the house and still touch the cedar siding. And so we ended up putting flashing along the bottom of that gap so that the embers couldn't get in there and ignite the house. Let's see. And also, if something is burning right next to the house, like if we had fuel in our 0 to 5 foot fuel free zone, if it was like a juniper tree or something, just the heat from that burning juniper could ignite right through the stucco just by the I forgot the word, temperature, the temperature heat going through the stucco. So for a lot of reasons, don't have fuel right next to your house. Dave Root, who was our friend at the Colorado State Forest Service, wanted me to mention when we got to stucco siding that cracks like this should be repaired because embers can even fly in there. Like we saw in the video, those cracks lead somewhere into the insulation or just right into the house. So be sure and caulk around gas pipes or electric wires where the pipes penetrate the stucco. Check the outside light fixtures and seal any gaps between the electric boxes and the stucco. And caulk around windows, doors, and outdoor light fixtures to prevent ember entry through the gaps in the siding or stucco. We are repeating ourselves for a reason. Okay, everybody talks about wood siding and wonders if it's safe. With proper mitigation, wood siding can be reasonably safe. Keep the 0 to 5 foot zone free of fuel and make sure your next 30 feet is only discontinuous fuel, and keep the wood siding well maintained. Do everything you can to avoid direct flame contact with that combustible wood siding, by reducing the fuels in the home ignition zone, and it'll be safer. You should have a 6-inch clearance between the foundation and the siding so that the siding does not extend all the way down to the grade where the embers could gather. In this case, they use metal flashing. It could just be concrete clearance from the ground to the siding. So we're at the bottom of page 5. Make sure embers cannot accumulate or lodge anywhere on or around the siding of the home. This is a very open-ended question compared to the others, but it's a place for you to just stop and analyze the whole exterior of the house and see what you might have missed. From the point of view of the ember blizzard blowing around the house, where are the chinks in the armor? And just look again, see what you missed. Here's the same question, yes or no. Embers cannot accumulate or lodge anywhere on or around the siding of the home. I just see this as a catch-all for an odd situation like this, where there's a wooden lattice built up on the deck for sun protection, and it's attached to the wooden eaves. What would you tell this homeowner to do? Maybe you could think of this the same way as a wooden fence that's attached to the house, which we are going to talk about soon, why that's not a good idea. Like here, I might recommend that they put metal flashing between the edge of the house and the wood structure so that if the wood structure caught on fire, it couldn't continue and get the rest of the roof.
I don't know what you could do about that. It's like a fuse sticking out of a,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yes. I'm embarrassed to say this was on my old house. And when we added it, I hadn't learned all this yet, and it just made sense at the time. But anyway, no. So then we thought about the flashing afterwards. It's really embarrassing. Okay, now we're on page 6. Make sure that caulk is applied to trim to siding locations where it has missing or where it has failed. There was never caulk here in the first place, but there's just a gap there. So what are you going to do about it? You don't have to use caulk. You could do something like flashing or something to stop embers from being able to get in there. So you see how this is problem solving on your part, and you're becoming more aware of risks that you didn't know about before.
Hey, Lisa,
Yes.
that part, would expanding foam, would that work?
I can't, the expanding foam, I am not sure what happens if the embers hit it.
Because I know so if you finish a basement and you're framing it, you can fill gaps with the expanding foam. That's considered okay as far as helping to mitigate fire spreading. So I was kind of thinking that would work on the outside of the house as well.
Oh, okay. I'm not going to answer that definitively, but I can see why you want it to work. extending
It just
foam.
it just seems like, I mean, you can fill it up with a lot of caulk, or you can use a little bit of expanding foam.
Okay.
I'm not going to say I'm 100% sure that would be okay, but it just seems, based on my experience from having finished a number of basements, that will pass inspection as far as helping to keep a fire from spreading through your basement.
Okay. Well, that's okay. That's worth checking into. I'm going to check into it also, and I'll see what I can find out, Randy. And then if you want to read the label on your can and tell me what it says too, that I'll just want to. Everything generates.
We were filling in some stucco gaps, and I read the label on it, and they all said flammable over 240 degrees.
Mm.
So,
Yeah,
so
the
did not use
while it's
for,
wet, or
no, when it was done.
it was done. Okay.
Yeah,
Mm.
it said hardened foam, great stuff, and all the other ones had a flammable warning on it that it wasn't to be used in exterior applications.
Okay. Well, and that's why I was kind of curious, because I know, like I said, I've finished basements before, and I've used it in between the frame and the cement wall, and that was okay for the inspector. But that would be an interior, not an exterior application.
Yeah, what passes code is not necessarily what is
They
safe
can only
for
go by
wildfires.
what their list is asking them to check. So that's what we got to do though. Is you got to keep asking questions, and I'm going to ask some more questions about that this week and see what we can figure out. You'll like this next one though. Well, maybe you won't like this next one. Okay. So when we start talking about the next most vulnerable part of any house, it is the glass windows. Here's why. Fire burns at 1500 to 2000 degrees Fahrenheit. Radiant heat. Regular old glass cracks and breaks at 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Tempered glass, which is what is shown here, it'll break at 630 degrees Fahrenheit. And when the glass fractures, the embers can then fly inside the house through the window and burn it from the inside out, starting with the curtains, the carpet, moving to the furniture, the books, the clothing. If you have dual pane glass that is just 2 layers of glass instead of 1, that isn't even tempered, that might help. If you have tempered glass, that's better. I have several bits of information from the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, IBHS. They're the same ones who did the video I showed you at the beginning with the 2 sides of the house. Their lead wildfire research engineer, Faraz Hedayati, says, under wildfire conditions, the outer pane of a window tends to pop out because the fire has melted the frame. It's important that at least the inner pane of a double paned window is tempered glass. So all that to say that this question here says, are the windows dual or multi-pane, preferably with tempered glass instead of single pane? Yes or no? And you might end up with an assortment of answers here if your house has had windows installed at different times. Especially if you're a little panicked just by this whole thought, start with the windows that have vegetation underneath them, because they are more vulnerable than other windows. It might be easier to remove the vegetation than to change the window right away. That was a lot in one slide, but we'll just charge on here. Be sure that window screening in front of the installed to minimize the number of embers that could enter the home. So radiant heat exposure is what we just talked about. Heat making the glass crack. While screens in front of the windows are another layer of defense, as long as they are metal window screens or fiberglass. But if they're plastic or polyethylene, they will melt when the first flying chunk of burning material hits it. So if you're not home when your wildfire happens, then, and if the windows are open, or if the glass breaks due to the radiant heat, if you have metal screens, you'll be in much better shape. Do you see why now? That was a long sentence too, but it all follows. The risk factors can be mitigated in a series.
Yeah, it seemed like the recent decade of fires has been so many people are not home. You know, they're out somewhere, and or maybe they left because there was a fire danger, or they were leaving because it was smoky.
Yeah.
Nobody gets home to go, well, let me put the fire shutters up.
Exactly. And we do talk about that in a lot of iterations. Like we don't want you to be home. I mean, if you happen to be home and you're leaving, close the fire shutters or the screens, but the chances of you being home are not that good. Yeah. Okay. So make sure that open crawl space.
But Lisa, before you go on, there's one comment and one question.
Okay.
One goes back to the foam piece, and the comment from Kim was fire-rated foam. Expanding foam can be used as an efficient seal against smoke and gas, providing up to 240 minutes fire rating, as well as being useful due to its excellent feeling characteristics. Fire-rated foam has high thermal properties and provides acoustic insulation. And then Emil has a question. It says, Lisa, is it recommended that dual pane windows are made from metal? Is vinyl not recommended?
Well, yeah, that last comment when he talked about the inner pane of the window or the outer pane popping out, That I just added that recently, and I that's the first I'd heard it that stated quite that way. So I'm just telling you about risk factors I don't know quite how to solve. But the most important thing is that let's see how does so what he was saying there was, at least if the first pane of the window pops out because of the heat, you'll have another pane in there that won't pop out because it's held in by the backside maybe. So what I'm doing here is introducing you to a bunch of risk factors that I cannot entirely explain, but you have lots more questions to ask now.
I think that the question is more related to the framing and the supporting of the glass, not so much the glass itself. So
The
windows are made
framing.
from metal is vinyl not recommended.
Oh, like vinyl. I see what you're saying. Vinyl framing. Huh.
Generally, the answer I understand is yes. If you look at other IBHS videos, they have a video where you have gutters that are made from metal and a gutter that's made from vinyl. And if there's flammable material that is against that, then the vinyl melts and then it starts to drip. So then that can, impact the structural integrity of that window. It's more important about the materials that are against that particular vinyl than the vinyl itself. But if you hit a lot of, let's say a large chunk of ember that were burning right next to that vinyl, it could potentially melt.
And just the way Mr. Hedayati said his statement was, if the outer pane of the window pops out because the fire has melted the frame, it's important that at least the inner pane of a double pane window is tempered, because he's implying there that the inner one won't pop out then, even if it might be vinyl. That's a good, okay, I'm going to look into that some more. I just came across that one this week, so sorry to worry you for that way. I'm going to worry about a lot of other stuff instead. Let's go on to open crawl spaces. Make sure they are enclosed with non-combustible material, which is called skirting. This is so the debris and the embers cannot fly under, in this case, it's a shed. They don't want them to fly under there and smolder under the structure where there's probably leaves that have blown in and stuff like that too.
Also keeps the critters out.
And the critters, yeah. Well, you wish, but
Yeah.
Yeah, they're tricky. Make sure enclosed spaces are ventilated according to local building code requirements. Okay, they want you to have the required ventilation, because you can't block off your whole house. That's what they're saying. If you seem to be, I can't tell you more about how many vents you ought to have. That's a different category here, but I know that houses need vents to deal with moisture. So I cannot tell you more about that, but let's see, let's just keep moving. So the other question here is, all the foundation vents have 1/8 inch corrosion resistant metal screening that is in good condition. This one it looks funny because it has some paint on it, but it's basically in good condition, and it does protect the vent opening. And Mr. Hedayati from the IBHS said that he's talking about the intumescent screening in this case also, where you can, if instead of just having regular metal mesh in here, you can have the kind that expands when heat hits it, like the embers, that will close off this vent at a critical time. He says you can even use that kind of mesh in the metal ridge vents on your roof too. So I have seen it available at Home Depot and other stores like that. Does this give you a panic attack? Make sure that combustible materials stored in the crawl space or under the building are removed for a non-skirted open crawl space foundation. The answer on this one would have to be no. This one here looks like a pile of kindling waiting for a spark, and it's underneath the house.
Well, maybe it's skirted.
And maybe it's skirted. Still, just not a good idea. Yeah. The key, like this is what Russ was talking about, is removing the fine, dry fuels that let the flames ignite and burn long enough to ignite the bigger fuels, because that's just how a campfire starts, with kindling and a little spark. Kindling is just those fine, dry fuels, and that's what we want you to get rid of. So yes, no, or not applicable. Closable foundation vents are closed when a wildfire threatens, but opened after the wildfire has passed. And then the other one says, non-closable vents have detached closure devices that can be easily accessed and attached during a wildfire and removed after the threat has passed. I actually haven't seen these in Colorado, and if they don't pertain to your house, you can just say not applicable and move on. Who is really going to have time, like we talked about, to open and close these when you're on your way out, or if you're not home? If you have a situation like this, could you install 1/8 inch mesh in there instead? I'm not sure. I would, you'd have to get somebody in there who can look at it and figure out if it fits all the criteria. Take pictures and ask questions. Here's a dryer vent. They should be any dryer vent or wall-mounted air opening for furnaces should be screened with 1/8 inch corrosion-resistant metal mesh. So there's some controversy about this one. One viewpoint is that you should screen the vents to prevent the embers from getting in, and that comes from the researchers. But if you do put a screen over this, it could trap the dryer lint that tends to want to come out, which would increase the threat of a fire in the dryer. And that's what worries the fire marshals. So definitely clean out the lint trap inside your dryer with every load of laundry, so that there's less likelihood of lint getting out into the pipe trying to exit the house anyway. And then just become more aware of your risks. That's our main job here. Is every situation's a little different, but here's another thing to check. When I went out to check this on my house, we had a different kind of a dryer vent that had a little circle, a little piece of like a lid that was supposed to lift up when the dryer was running, and it was supposed to just sit down on the dryer when it was not running. But something had broken and the thing had filled with snow, and so the little lid was filled with water. And so the lid could not lift up when we used the dryer. It's like, why isn't the dryer drying anything anymore? So it's worth doing home maintenance for lots of reasons. Yes or no, the dryer vent stays closed unless the dryer is running. So in that case I just described to you, it wasn't opening automatically like it was supposed to. But the house that Kim and I looked at up against where that was built into the hill, we discovered the dryer vent was coming out right at eye level where we could see it, and the critters had been going in and out their dryer vent, and so were the drifts from the snow. It was quite a situation. Okay. Yes or no, the deck is built of non-combustible materials. Well, this one sure isn't. And worse, it is dried out wood. It's not even well-maintained wood. If you have a wood deck, keep it stained and in good repair, and use the tips about flashing at the edges that I showed you before. During a wildfire, decks can ignite from a surface fire from below or from an ember attack from above. And if it ignites, a burning deck will present a long-term flame exposure to the side of the house, potentially igniting or otherwise resulting in failure of the siding or breaking the glass of a window or a sliding glass door. If the decking or siding is very combustible, the flames could also spread to the eaves. Decks. So think a lot about decks. So one option people bring up sometimes is intumescent paint, which is similar to the word intumescent means it expands when it gets hot. Intumescent paint is supposed to prevent or delay combustion of wood. However, it is expensive and it has to be reapplied very often by a professional because it loses its effectiveness very quickly, especially in Colorado kind of climate. So it would be better, instead of using that, to work on other home hardening, keeping your 5-foot zone free, not connecting fences to the homes, keep your wood stained, or replace it with non-combustible materials such as Trex. Let's see. That's not the one. Let's see. Let's scroll down here. Yeah. Because Matthew Nelson, who was our advisor from the town of Manitou Springs, he says, it may be the cynic in me, but I just don't put much stock in something that looks like a magic bullet. You can't tell folks you have fireproof paint and think they're good for the next 10 years. So it sounds too good to be true. Here's a deck made of Trex, which is a fiber plastic composite, which is still combustible if embers get piled up on it, and it will melt and fall down, but at least it won't catch on fire. Most deck boards used in open frame decks are considered combustible, which is wood or plastic or fiber plastic composites. So solid surface deck surfaces like concrete, stone, and tile are the ones that are non-combustible. This is the same photo. Let me back up. So in this picture, in the back there, you can see that they use the flashing on the intersection between the deck and the house to protect the side of the house, which is wood. So the deck is Trex, but the side of the house is wood. And they for all the reasons, the corners of the intersections are the vulnerable places where the embers will accumulate. So what can you do there? I know you can't read this, but this is from the same study from Faraz Hedayati from the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. He says, if the deck ignites, the fire intensity is strongly linked to the joist material and the wind conditions, and metal joists are the best choice for new decks. Even if composite boards are used for a deck, embers could fall through and ignite the material underneath. So the spacing of the boards is significant, but also is the material below the deck. So if you have the opportunity to build a new deck, use metal joists. I've got more on this in a minute. Now go to page 7, about a quarter of the way down. We're getting into the home stretch. Be sure that combustible materials are not stored under the deck and are placed at least 30 feet away from the home. This goes with all the things we just learned about decks. They are just as much of a risk as your roof is, really, as far as exposure to risk. So watch for gas grill tanks and lumber and firewood. All those combustible things should be away from the house or in the garage, which we're going to talk about in a minute, where you can close the door. Sometimes people ask about LP gas tanks for your grill. It's best not to store them on your deck, but of course that is where you want them when you grill out. So just know your risk, and can you clear the area around the grill and put it on a definitely non-combustible surface such as concrete to reduce the risk to the grill? Are there leaves or pine needles piled up in the corner near the tank? You're going to start to get good at this. You're going to be able to look around your house now and just go, oh, there's one. I didn't notice that one before, but now that I've got all these concepts floating around in my head, I can identify more issues.
When we returned from the Black Forest fire evacuation, in everyone's backyard in the middle of the grassy lawns was everyone's 1, 2, or 3 propane tanks that the firemen had disconnected and at the curb. I'm sorry, at the curb. They also took like the patio furniture. Yeah, they took the patio furniture, moved it away from the house, not in the lawns. But yeah, they put the propane tanks by the curb.
Oh, okay, by the curb. Yeah, I had heard. I had heard like if you're evacuating, you need to get your propane tank thrown away from the house, either into the woods or at the curb. Yeah, okay. And then we're going to talk about deck furniture in a minute.
Yeah, and we just got used to disconnecting it at the end of cooking and putting it in the garage.
That's a super habit, and that doesn't cost you anything except the minute that it takes to do that. Yeah. So if anybody says home hardening is expensive, some of it is, but some of it's just more habits. As we said before, metal screens or sheet metal can enclose the underside of the deck to prevent you from storing things under there and it removes the need to rake under it, and it prevents the embers from getting in under the house. And the rodents. Oh, there I put the rodents. Be sure that debris is removed between the deck board joints and other areas where debris can accumulate. And this is free, except for buying this cool little tool to clean out between the gaps. It really does make a difference in your wildfire risk to keep the debris out of there, keeps the boards from rotting. It gives the embers a little bit of less fine dry fuel to discover. The NFPA recommends a minimum of a 1/4 inch separation between the deck boards so that less debris can collect because the cracks are actually wider. If the debris, let's see, how does this, you picture this? The debris really wants to accumulate in the cracks that are right above those joists that we talked about a little bit ago. If the embers ignite the debris, then the fire passes to the wood joists, unless you happen to have metal ones under there, but most people don't. Most people have wood joists in their current decks. So can you see how all these risk factors can accumulate and how you can work to fix them? Be sure to replace any rotted or degraded deck boards or structure support members. Yes or no, combustible items like deck furniture and cushions can be moved inside or as far away from the house as possible when a wildfire threatens. In this case, they could be moved inside, but they're not. People tend to keep them outside all the time. It's more practical to keep the cushions inside and stored unless you're actually using them. This is another one of those habits like Russ mentioned, because most of the time you're not using them. It's just the 1 hour a week when you're outside that you are using them. Also, don't keep firewood on your deck. It should be at least 30 feet from the house. And what else is wrong with this particular fire pit? Does anybody know?
You have no screen?
Yeah, no screen. Yep. In my HOA, there's a $5,000 fine for open burning. That's what this is. So there's a lot of issues here. Now, fencing. This is more important than you might think. Any fencing directly attached to the home should be made of non-combustible material that is at least 5 feet of non-combustible material. A wooden fence like this can act like a fuse right up to the house. In the Waldo Canyon fire and the Marshall fire up in Louisville and Superior, the firefighters saw houses get ignited this way, where the wooden part out in the yard with grass under it, it caught on fire there, and then it just kept burning like a fuse toward the house. And fences also conveyed the fire from one house to the next. And here's some more information from the, this is a different study. This is a 300-page study from the National Institute of Standards and Technology from last year, emphasizing the dangers of wooden fences. The key takeaways: avoid parallel fences that are 3 feet apart or less. Also avoid good neighbor fences. Those are the ones where the boards alternate on either side of the supports so that they're pretty on both sides. They're pretty for both neighbors. They have the same physics of fire as the parallel fences, and they were very conducive to spreading flames. So avoid proximity to other combustible fuels like mulch at the base of the fence and above the fence like tree branches. And any place where the fence crosses a property line, those tend to not get maintained. Avoid proximity of combustible fence to the residence to prevent direct ignition. Replace wood or wood plastic landscaping features with vinyl, stone, brick, or steel. And like we talked about, vinyl will deform and melt, but it won't actually catch on fire. But it will fall down. And then what happens then? So you can do your own problem solving. But stone, brick, steel, or vinyl. Keep your fence and your yard clear of debris and fuel that could provide potential pathways for fire. Harden structures against firebrands to prevent structure ignition from embers produced by fences and other combustible sources. This study was called 300 pages on this. Wind-driven fire spread to a structure from fences and mulch. Wow. But they did this study after the Marshall Fire because so many houses suffered from this situation. Here's a good example of what you can do with fencing. In some HOAs, the only fences that are allowed are wooden fences. So what do you do for fire safety? You can replace a section of the fence closest to your house with metal fencing that blends with the rest of the fencing. In my HOA, you used to have to specifically request this to the Architectural Control Committee, but if you help educate them calmly and nicely, they might begin to be more open to suggestions. This picture here came from the Boulder Wildfire Partners as a good example. So there should be no climbing vegetation growing on the fence either. All these risks add up. Now on page 7 of the checklist, we're 2/3 of the way down now, are detached structures such as sheds, playsets, garages, etc., at least 30 feet from the house. And if the answer is no, then does every structure have a defensible space? And if not, if they don't have their own defensible space, you have to merge the two spaces together. See what they've done in this drawing where they're not quite 30 feet apart. So the 5 to 30 foot zone of the house and the garage overlap in the middle. So all this means is every structure on the property has its own ignition zone that needs to be analyzed and kept clear of fuel. The 0 to 5 foot fuel-free zone, which is the red line in this drawing, and the 5 to 30 foot discontinuous fuels zone going out to the yellow line. Let's look at this overlapping home ignition zone idea some more. In this example, the red line again is the 0 to 5 foot zone, and the yellow is the 5 to 30 foot zone that should have discontinuous fuels. I'm going to zoom in on this so you can see better. What is your initial feeling about the home ignition zone for this house and these sheds? Are the fuels in the 5 to 30 foot zone discontinuous? Or do you think their home ignition zones need some work? I think they need work. They need work. Yep. Sometimes when I go do a home evaluation, I look at Google Maps first before I ever go to the house. I'll turn on the satellite view and look at the house just like this, and I start making notes before I even get there. And then maybe when I get there, it turns out the Google Map photo was out of date, but usually there's work to do. Okay, yes or no, detached structures are made of non-combustible materials. So in this case, this one looks like aluminum. Now the question I have on this one is, what do you have stored inside here? You still need a fuel-free zone around the shed, but we've already evaluated that. So in this particular item, we're just making sure what is the structure made out of. If it's a swing set and it's made out of plastic, that's that they just want you to analyze it. Ones I see a lot when I'm doing Firewise evaluations are tree houses. Do you really need that tree house? Make sure that vegetation is maintained on a trellis type structure, and it is pruned regularly to remove dead undergrowth. On the left, there really is a trellis under there on the left. And the plant on the right needs to be pruned. And pruning isn't even really the best solution. It would be better not to have vegetation climbing up your house at all. We're going to learn about that some more when we get to our ignition resistant vegetation module coming up in a couple of weeks. But just what we're going to do on that night is analyze different types of plants are more readily available as fuel to a fire. So we'll analyze which ones are less safe to have right next to your house, like junipers and scrub oak. Okay, go to page 8 now on your home assessment checklist. Yes or no? Address marking is at least 3 inches tall or larger to be sure it is readable? In both of these examples, the answer is yes. Reflective numbers are better. The address signs should be mounted on a metal post because a wood post could burn and fall over. When I drove around after the Black Forest fire was over, I saw a lot of plastic mailboxes and fences that had just melted right down to the ground. Also, the address should be visible from the road and not hidden just on the side of the house. People tend to put their addresses on the house next to the garage light that puts it in a shadow instead of putting it right under where the light would shine at night. Have you ever tried to find your own house at night just by reading the address numbers visible on the houses on your street? Or even reading the ones on the road? It's an amazingly frustrating experience. The house number at the end of the driveway helps medical emergency responders find your home quickly when seconds make the difference between life and death. GPSs are fine, but if you get there and there are 3 driveways all together and you don't know which one it is, that doesn't help you anymore. And at night, or when the smoke is thick, even homes close to the road may not be visible. Frequently, the firefighters cannot see past the hood of their truck, and the address sign may be the only clue to the firefighters that there is a home in the area. They do a lot of structure protection at night when the fire behavior has moderated. And if they don't know there's a home there, they can't prepare it or try to squelch any smoldering embers. So do the firefighters a favor and put your address labels up there.
Lisa, wasn't there a program like you can buy for your neighborhood, like your neighborhood could buy into getting all metal signs or something like that?
I had heard about, like, some of the fire departments sometimes sponsor programs like that. But they're only intermittent. I bought address markers like this at the store, and they were about $15.
Okay.
So it would be great to organize your whole neighborhood and get them all done together. I know, Andre, remember, and I think it was Red Rock Ranch, they had somehow done it as a coordinated effort. I don't know if it was through their HOA or through, I don't think it was the fire department in that case.
I can't remember I know it was a coordinated effort, but I'm not sure the funding of that.
Mhm.
I think it was, they developed a standard and they were they were encouraging their neighbors to do it, but I'm not sure about the funding aspect.
Mhm. And you're just all gonna crack up when I tell you about this one. So at the 2021 Colorado Wildland Fire Conference, we learned that there was a study where they had documented characteristics of a whole bunch of construction in some neighborhoods, the vegetation, what the housing stock looked like, all these things that we've just talked about. Do these houses look like they have defensible space? How close are they together? And things like that in 4 neighborhoods. And then the East Troublesome Fire occurred, and it burned one of the neighborhoods that was in their study. And so they were able to compare their modeling predictions with what really happened when the fire came through, which is tragic. But one of the variables that predicted which homes had a better chance of surviving was the houses with reflective address numbers had a better chance of surviving than the homes that did not have them. Why? Any ideas why? Is there anything magical about the address numbers on the mailbox?
They're seen, and a fireman would know there's a house there.
That is true. That is true. But everybody in the room, this was fascinating. Everybody in the room just went, oh. And what they told us was that they decided that having the address markers was an indicator of overall property maintenance. The people who bothered to install and pay $15 for the house numbers were also the same kind of people who would bother to mow the grass around their house and thin out the vegetation and get the pine needles out of their gutters.
Yep.
It just
I did right along with the fire department and the Red Cross marking houses, and we're driving through a neighborhood in Pulpit Rock, And the fireman said, well, I'm not defending that house. And
Yep.
I said, well, why did you decide that? He says, well, they haven't bothered to sweep the leaves out of the gutter. The mailbox has kind of fallen down and I can't see the house. I'm not even going down there.
3-second triage.
Right.
Yep. I don't make this stuff up. And now, yeah, I've got corroboration now. Okay. So the driveway should be at least 12 feet wide and unobstructed. This one is not. You can't even tell there's a house back there. This checklist only asks you for a 12-foot wide driveway, but our Dave Root from the State Forest Service, he says he wishes it would be 30 or 50 feet wide for safe ingress and egress, not just for the firefighters, but for you, because as you can see, whether this is scrub oak or pine trees, if those on fire, you cannot drive down your driveway. So
yeah, the fire department will not risk their equipment if they can't see a way to get in and get back out again, and they can't see if there's a place to turn around at the end.
Russ has been reading my slides. It says right here, firefighters decide in a 3-second triage whether or not to save this house.
Lisa Margaret has a comment that the U.S. Forest Service and BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, and fire departments drive around and inspect areas. And if a wildland fire is in an area that is not mitigated, they will not send responders into that area.
I think I'm under the impression that the fire departments do this kind of decision making on a street by street basis. Although your fire department, your local fire department knows what the neighborhoods look like. They know where the pinch points are that are going to cause traffic jams because there's too many houses coming off from one road, and they know they're going to have to ask law enforcement to come and help with evacuations there. That's why they do the tabletop exercises, because they know ahead of time where the problem areas are. And then when they bring in help from the outside, yeah, that's why I say when you start to work with your neighborhood and everybody's starting to fill out these evaluation forms and doing work, I think it's very important that you would inform your fire department that you are doing this work in case they haven't driven by there in a while, so that they know, hey, that neighborhood's really getting their act together. And that'll help us in the future. If we get in a tight spot, we'll know that there might be less fuel in there than there used to be, and it might be safer than we had thought. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, we'll talk. It was just a comment, and we'll talk some about that next week when we have the fire and forestry professionals here. And I've seen also where they've talked about using different techniques versus driving folks in. So they may decide that that's an area where they want to focus and have more slurry dropped in that particular area to help the fire preventing or slowing the fire from coming into that area. But yeah, we'll cover more of that when we get into that fire enforcement professionals.
Yeah. Okay, so any gates that you have should be wide enough to let the emergency equipment in and out. Homeowners should maintain a turnaround area at the house end of the driveway that allows large fire engines to turn around and escape quickly. They have to make a split-second decision whether or not they think they can go up there and then get out again. I have heard discussions on podcasts where some people in California actually have gone to this trouble to create the turnaround. And then I don't know how they did it, but they put a sign at the end of the street side of their driveway with a drawing showing that there really was like a turnaround up there, so that the firefighters would know. Don't give them reason to doubt you. Trees and shrubs overhanging the road should be trimmed to a minimum of 13.5 feet to allow emergency vehicles to pass without hitting low-hanging tree branches. This is only 10 feet here. I think this might be in Australia. And this is on a road. This isn't even a driveway. I don't even know why this is allowed.
guess it would be meters if it was Australia, right?
Oh, yeah, it says 10 feet. I don't know. Well, anyway, don't let that happen near you. But I know where all of you live, and I think you all have danger situations for the fire department. Okay, so don't be overwhelmed. This has been a lot these last 2 weeks, just looking at your own property. So focus on the home ignition zone first when you're trying to reduce the wildfire risk. Start with the roof and the construction of the rest of the house. And then the first 5 feet around the house should be the fuel-free zone. And then the 5 to 30-foot zone should not have continuous fuels in it that will draw the fire closer to the house. You want to have kind of a moat around your house that won't draw the fire in. Then work on the next 100 feet out from the house to maintain that vegetation. And when you have questions, take those pictures like I showed you last week in the remote home ignition zone diagram, the one on each corner of your house, and then the other 4 showing your driveway and under the steps and stuff, and show it to your fire department or somebody who knows what they're talking about, and it gets your questions answered. So your home ignition zone might overlap with your next door neighbor due to lot sizes. And that's when building communication around your neighborhood can help even more. So first you do what you can do on your own property, but then help your neighbors learn what you know, and then you can all cooperate getting the work done. Because homes that are located close to each other are definitely a risk of starting each other on fire, even if there aren't any trees. Like this is what happened in the Marshall fire. So Faraz Hedayati said that the relationship between one burning structure and the exposure to a neighboring structure, they found that a distance of 50 feet between structures had less risk of home-to-home ignition than ones that were closer together. So if you're closer than 50 feet to your neighbors, or if you have a shed that's close to your neighbors 50 feet, what do you do then? This is in Monument. Every one of these homes here has its own home ignition zone that needs to be analyzed for vulnerabilities, whether it's the way the house is built and maintained, or how the zones around the house are maintained, or what the vegetation's doing. If everyone takes care of their home hardening and the home ignition zone in the same way, it makes it less likely their house will catch fire and less likely it will become a problem for your house, and vice versa. So, okay, last section. A few more inexpensive but vital tasks for you to do. Go to page 2 of your checklist. This is for wildfire preparedness, but other types of disasters too. Review your homeowner's insurance policy and prepare an inventory of your home's contents. Take photos showing how many of whatever you have. That will help with your insurance claims. Every piece of furniture, every drawer and cupboard and everything, take pictures of it. And for expensive items, you should take a photo of the serial and model numbers and have them appraised. We're going to talk about this a lot more when the Office of Emergency Management comes to talk to us about evacuation planning. Oh, sorry, Andre.
I want to emphasize thing. Can you go back one slide, please? When we reference the review, the homeowner's insurance policy, don't think about just the house, but also think about your basement and your foundation. Here, the Waldo Canyon fire burned so hot that the foundations were compromised, and many homes or homeowners had to go out and get loans to fund the pouring of a new basement and foundation because they did not include that aspect within their insurance policy. So imagine losing your entire house and then losing all of those aspects, and then finding out that you have to now go out and get like a $30,000 loan on top of that so you could pour the foundation, so then the insurance company could build on top of that. It's just, a tough thing. So just be sure to include concern with looking at your policy to ensure that it covers your basement and your foundation.
And I don't know if you realize this, but if your house burns down and you have a mortgage on it, you still have to make mortgage payments on it while you're not living there. So that's why home insurance is so important. And a lot of people in Black Forest had canceled their homeowners insurance because their house was paid off. I heard lots of stories like that. Ah,
It was hard to get insurance when we bought our house here. I had to call 30 different companies to get covered.
30. Whoa. Wow. Wow.
But I
There's
had to
always-
look at that aerial view like you talked about. And I said, "Oh, I see here you have a metal roof," which I had put on the application, but and also see this big cement driveway all around your house. It's like, yep, okay, we can cover you.
Microclimate. Yeah. That's what Jack Cohen says. It's not just because you're near the wildland urban interface. It's what happens in each home's home ignition zone. There you go. Okay. Do all residents in your house know where the gas, electric, and water main shutoff valves are and how to use them? That's not just for one person, it's for all of you. If you have to turn off the gas, by the way, never turn it back on. You should ask for help from the gas company. And yes, Colorado is at risk for earthquakes, which can start fires too. Do you have heavy fire resistant drapes throughout the home? However, whoever has drapes at all, if you have drapes, you would want them to be fire resistant, or you could have none. Or you could just say not applicable. Are newspapers and rubbish regularly disposed of? If you have bags of pine needles and stuff waiting to be picked up by the trash, store them away from the house. Or borrow a trailer and take them to the dump. Just don't do the piecemeal thing where it takes you all year because you've got 52 bags. Is a screen installed in front of every fireplace or stove? And yes or no, fireplace and wood stoves and charcoal grill ashes are stored in a metal container and disposed of only when cool. Your chimney, this isn't really on here, but your chimney should be swept regularly because creosote can build up inside the flue, especially if you're burning pine. Creosote is as hard as cement and can totally block the flue. So I don't know no more than that, but if you have a regular wood burning fireplace, get it cleaned. Have your residents create a family disaster plan and a supply kit to be prepared for wildfire and potential evacuations. We're going to teach you a lot more about that in that later module about general preparedness and evacuation planning and community emergency response training. For right now, do you all have a meetup point that is not inside your neighborhood where you would all know to find each other when you're not home and the phone lines are jammed and the first responders have closed your neighborhood? Do you know where you would find each other?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Kim
right.
has a lot of experience by all these pre-evacuations. She knows how to wrap things up pretty quickly.
Yeah. Here's the
common
fireproof.
lot tends to be the Walmart parking lot.
Yeah.
That's a good one. You know,
This
they're
is
going to defend Walmart at all costs.
They're gonna. Well, it has a fuel-free zone around it too, but except for the propane. Okay. So don't store all your stuff in a fireproof safe, assuming that it's really fireproof, because paper burns at, who knows, Fahrenheit 451 degrees Fahrenheit is where paper will ignite when it gets that hot. And wildfires burn up to 2000 degrees. So if you have a safe deposit box at your bank, that would be a better place to put documents at least. Make sure your bank is not in the same neighborhood as you are, though. That happened to a lot of people in the Waldo Canyon fire. Their bank was right down the street from their house and they evacuated everything west of I-25. 35,000 people were not allowed back in there for 3 weeks. That was confusing. Do you have copies of your vital emergency documents and all the numbers that you need to start calling the insurance company and whoever? If you have copies of all this stuff written down either on this form, the emergency financial first aid kit, or with your photos or anything, we advise you put them on a flash drive and mail them to your sister in Illinois or someplace else that is not your house. We'll talk about this more in a couple weeks. Okay, look at your electric and gas stoves and make sure they're clean. Maintenance is a theme here. Security bars on windows have quick release mechanisms. I haven't seen any of those in Colorado either. They're supposed to keep the burglars out, but they're not supposed to trap you inside if there's a fire. Is there a solid door with self-closing hinges installed between the living areas and the garage so that the door will close itself and be a barrier to sparks? And this emblem here shows that it is a certified fire safe door. Does the garage have a garage door? Do you keep it closed? And are the perimeters weather sealed? That will keep the flying embers from sneaking into your garage. Are gasoline, oily rags, and other flammable materials stored in approved safety cans and in a safe location away from the base of buildings? Don't let there be piles of rags in the corner in a cardboard box or near the water heater or anything. Limit, isolate, eliminate, and separate all of these dangerous materials. Kept away from water heaters. Don't put cardboard boxes next to the water heater. No paint or flammable liquids within 18 inches of the water heater. Remove dryer lint from the lint screen. Avoiding fuel plus heat plus oxygen because that makes a fire. Do you have tools such as a shovel, bucket, rake, etc. available for emergencies? A fire extinguisher in the kitchen, in the garage, near any heat sources? Are all residents in your house trained to use them? Not just you, but everybody. By the way, a little plug for a CERT class, you can actually practice using a fire extinguisher on a real fire if you take the free CERT class, Community Emergency Response Team. So let us know if you want to know more about that. And then remember, extinguishers should be recharged every couple of years. These are firefighters in Falls Creek Ranch near Durango who are celebrating the good fire mitigation that the residents did there that allowed them to use that whole neighborhood as a staging area. When before that fire department had literally said that we'll never go in that neighborhood. This relates to that question from earlier. And then the people in that neighborhood realized what they needed to be doing, and they got ahead of the game. And so when this fire started, the fire department knew that they had done so much mitigation work and fuels reduction, and they were able to use their neighborhood as a base camp to work on that fire. So that's all I have about the Wildfire Assessment Program checklist. I hope you will finish going through it this week. That's your homework. Go all the way through it, take pictures of what you have questions of, and we'll attempt to answer questions or get you in contact with your local professionals who are your great resources. So go through the checklist, create your priority list, and that'll be part of your homework too. You could either just circle those items on the list because they're going to be the big ones with a no, and then prioritize them how you're gonna address them. We're gonna meet online next week. Then we're gonna have the next week off, and then we're gonna have our in-person evaluations on April 4th. Oh, that's everything. Okay.
I have one volunteer for that, and Heather volunteered her property in Arrowwood 3 for that, and would like to have one more additional property here. So if Elizabeth or Heather can get a second property for us to help. What we like to do is do a demonstration with one property and then use the second property for folks to go through and do their own evaluation on that particular property here. But if there's another nearby neighborhood that will could support also, then that would be great as well.
You can use my house. I don't care. I'm a mess. But
Well,
There are no perfect houses. I'd say use mine, but the dogs would be yapping so much, it would just be disturbing everybody.
but I'm building a deck, so I don't know how far it'll be along, but
Okay,
without steel things,
joists.
joists, yeah. So that would be on the check sheet.
So there are other things you can do to still make that a safer situation. It's not just an all or nothing. It's just what are the risks and how can I mitigate them? Now you can use the word mitigate in a lot of different sentences. It means lessening the risk.
yeah, it like Lisa's been covering, it's about the risk that you're willing to tolerate too. My risk mitigation is my marital risk mitigation, and my wife likes to have things like mulch around the house and a broom leaning against the house and flammable furniture on the front deck. And when I said, okay, this is one aspect that we're going to have more of a problem with, also with bushes close to the house. And I said, we're going to have more insurance to replace what we have with the house, because you decided that you want this as more than you want to have the full free mitigation. So then we're going to have to be ready to rebuild. And like our eyes gets real big, and boy, I'm sorry, you may not want it that way, but that's how the fire doesn't care about what your personal desires are about this. But so it's a balance. And we have wood siding on our house too, and replacing the entire wood siding of that would be, it's cost prohibitive. At some point we will replace it. It's good to see what Lisa showed in that second video when we first moved into the house, which is about 12 years ago. Those aspects were not available in a more cost-effective manner. So it's good to see that the materials are becoming more cost effective for you if you want to replace those types of elements. So, but we have a full wooden deck on the front part of the house. So we're looking at replacing that with materials that are more or less combustible here in the future. And we've already replaced the one back that years ago, but we're doing that not all at once. It's just expensive. So we're doing it.
Or in your case, you could use flashing and metal skirting around the bottom.
We're looking at that, and I hadn't even thought about this about my own mailbox. It is wooden, but I don't have any real grass around it. But I just thought, sometimes you let the grass grow a little bit more, and I never thought about putting flashing around the base of the mailbox. But that's one thought there along the way too. So a lot of different ideas, and it's all about risk mitigation and reducing your risk and what you're willing to tolerate.
I like that you guys both have the same problems everyone else does. You don't have a perfect house with a 12-foot concrete barrier and fire extinguishers at every door and crazy things.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I actually got my wife to buy in on is replacing the roof and getting a metal roof on our house. So I think that'll probably be the most significant change for us. We're coming up on the time to replace that. So she likes the thought of having a metal roof. And we'll see when we do that.
Emil, I wanted to ask you a question. You were worried that this stuff might not be applying to your neighborhood, and I can't remember what you said in your email. Do you feel better about that? Or not better, but more worried about that? I can't hear you. Oh, well, you're not muted, but well, anyway, I'll ask you that again next week and you can tell us, because it was something like you didn't think your neighborhood was enough of this pertain to your neighborhood, but I believe it does. But
let's think about the Marshall Fire. The neighborhoods around there were not right in the middle of any of the nearby forests. So like Lisa mentioned, the fires ran from grassland, which connected to fencing around there. And so you might want to think about your neighborhood. What are the borders around your particular neighborhood and what do those look like? Because then if it can start in a different neighborhood and then go from house to house to house into yours, then that's just as much of a concern.
Can't hear
I
you.
can't hear you. I think it's a microphone selection maybe. Yeah, but
We'll get to next time.
Yeah.
Marshall Fire, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the tragic thing, well, there was a lot of tragic things about the Marshall Fire. One of them was the winds that day were just like, that was crazy. So whatever anybody had done right, the winds were 120 miles an hour. So, but another thing about them was they are in the same county that the Boulder Wildfire Partners function in. And Boulder Wildfire Partners hadn't been focusing on Louisville and Superior because they weren't in the trees and they had to focus somewhere. You know, they had to start somewhere. But then, so Boulder Wildfire Partners was getting criticized later. Why didn't you save us? You know, I'm like, well, just there's, yeah. That's why we're out here educating people too. You can speak up when you see something. If you see something, say something. So good luck doing your homework this week. Write down your questions and we'll talk to you soon.
see you next week.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
You.
What a great bunch. I don't know what's wrong with your microphone.